Don't forget to come off mute.
You even better.
There we go. Thank you,
Thank you.
Wendy.
So often when people hear the word dementia, they immediately skip to the end stages. And when diagnosed with young onset dementia, so many people fall into a state of despair, believing it to be the end. But often that's due to society's attitude and due to the stigma associated with dementia. That's what I thought back in July 2014 when I was diagnosed, because no one told me any different. I was given a handshake, a sad look, and discharged by the consultant who diagnosed me. No words of encouragement, no support of how to adapt. But once me and my daughters got our heads around the diagnosis, I wasn't prepared to accept it was the end. My mantra has always been there's always a way to overcome the problems we face in life. People forget that there's a beginning, there's a middle, with so many adventures still to be had. And I was determined to continue to have adventures no matter what other people thought. And yes, it was a bummer of a diagnosis, and one I wouldn't wish on anyone. But I soon realized life wasn't going to be quite as I imagined. But I also realized that this new life was all about adapting to the challenges that dementia throws at you, trying to keep one step ahead of it and trying to outmaneuver dementia at every corner. I see it rather like playing a game, and I don't like losing. I'm not saying that it's plain sailing because it quite clearly isn't. But if you look at a diagnosis as a new way of living, it can make life much calmer and much less stressful for both myself, but also for those around you as well. I have a bit of a problem with the phrase living well with dementia. It was a good idea some years back, as there was nothing else other than suffering from. But I've since realised from meeting so many other people in my situation that it sets such a high standard that not everyone believes they can reach. So it ends up having a negative instead of a positive impact, making them feel inadequate. So instead, I just prefer living as well as you're able so that people don't feel inadequate when they're having a bad day, when they're struggling. People often say to me, what does it feel like to have dementia? Well, every day is a different day. You have good days, you have bad days. But on the bad days, it's like a fog descends on the brain and you can make little sense of the world around you. And on these occasions, I tell myself, it's the dementia, it's not me. One analogy I use that may help the drivers amongst you. When you've passed your test, you drive automatically. You turn left, you turn right, you stop, you start, all without thinking. But when you're learning, you have to take each maneuver step by step and concentrate so much. Well, that's where dementia has taken me back to, being that learner driver. I have to consciously think of how to do everything step by step. And it's exhausting living with dementia. We have a complex brain disease after all. Our experiences are very individual. Imagine the brain as a string of fairy lights, each fairy light representing a different function of the brain. Some lights flicker on and off, dementia affecting our ability to do something one day, and then the next we suddenly are able again. But when the light fails altogether, that's when dementia has taken that specific ability away for good. And that's why I can type and others can't, because different fairy lights flicker and fail for each of us. That's why they can still feel hunger and thirsty, but I don't. That's why some people still drive and I can't. I can type quicker than I can think and speak the words. And if I didn't have these words in front of me today, I'd be waffling. I hope you're all aware that dementia is not just about memory. So many of our senses are affected as well. Another misconception people have, and it's all covered in my latest book, What I Wish People Knew About Dementia. Everyone's experience is different. But we can have commonalities as well. I had to move from what I thought was my forever home in York to a quieter village just down the road in East Riding of Yorkshire. I used to live near the centre of York, near the hustle and bustle, and I adored it. But one of my first senses to be affected was my hearing. And it wasn't that I was going deaf. It was certain tones of noise physically hurt my ears. Some audiologists are now beginning to realise that many people with dementia can have hyperacusis, just like children with autism. It just means a sensitivity to noise. But they can also help us. If we wear hearing aids like I do, they can tone out the noise that physically hurts our ears. And believe me, getting the hearing aids changed my life going outside. It wasn't an overwhelming sensory experience anymore. So just think of that if you have anyone with dementia in your care. Clashing metal on metal, slamming doors, can all make people flinch. Just be aware of that. I used to run every other day, but my legs and my brain stopped working at the same speed, and I used to end up falling on a heap and on the floor. My taste buds totally changed. Very common for people with dementia. As I said, I no longer feel hunger or thirsty, but I have strategies to help me with those tasks. I have to have a reason to eat, because as you can imagine, it's very difficult to eat if you don't feel hunger. But I love walking, so I tell myself I can't walk unless I eat. Think of that if you know someone with dementia that's unable to tell you their likes, their dislikes. What they once liked, they might not tolerate anymore. Like I adored curry. Now it's the smell. I can't stand the smell. Are they sat with food uneaten? Is it because it's on the wrong colour plate? Because white food, white fish, white potato on a white plate, we can't see it. Contrast is so important for people with dementia. They may have forgotten how to eat. I struggle with a knife and fork now. because it's a complex process if you break it down. However, when I did move, I hadn't appreciated how hard it would be to get used to a new house, a new place where I lived. I met my neighbours by thinking their house was my house and trying to let myself in. So you can imagine the shock on their faces. But once I explained, my neighbours have been wonderful. But I had to make my house different because I live in a row of 4 identical houses. So my solution, because there's always a way, I simply stuck 2 forget-me-not tiles on each side of my front door. And now I know that house is my house. I have a tiny kitchen. When I moved in, it had 2 doors. And doors are often a big problem for people with dementia. For me, I can't remember what's at the other side, and I like to see what's on the other side. For others, they like them closed because it makes them feel safe. So my solution to suit me was simply to take the doors down. Simple yet effective solutions, but you have to get to know the person. I don't see my kitchen cupboards or my wardrobes because they're a very similar colour to the walls. So to me, there's just one wrong wall. My daughters would ask me in the beginning why I'm wearing the same clothes each day, but it was because I couldn't see the cupboards to open them to see all my clothes hanging in a row, or open the kitchen cupboards to see my cups in there. Many people have said I should have see-through cupboards, but not only are these expensive, but they also look chaotic if you don't keep them mega tidy. Mine were never going to be mega tidy. So my solution was simply to take a photograph of the contents of every cupboard and wardrobe. And it's not that I have to keep the contents in the same order as the photo. It's just the photo that attracts my attention to say, look in here, there's clothes. Look in here, there's cups. Simple yet effective solutions. Contrast is so important for people with dementia. If everything is a similar colour, it all blends into one. Vision affected many people with dementia. Our eyes see, but our brain doesn't interpret the information correctly. So going downstairs can be really difficult if the edge isn't clearly marked. But if you walk down in front of them and allow them to put their hand on your shoulder, then we're concentrating on you, not what's beneath us. Black can be a very bad colour for some people with dementia. For me especially, black mats in doorways looks like a massive hole in the floor. So please think of that in entrances to your establishments. Colour and contrast, so important. The easiest way to find out if a room, an area is dementia appropriate is to take a black and white photograph. If the shades of black, white and grey are really marked, you've got it perfect. If they all blend into one, you've got it very wrong. When I was diagnosed, as I said, my neurologist gave me a handshake, a sad look, and a simple goodbye. There's nothing I can do. The psychological effect of words and body language should never be underestimated by anyone, but especially healthcare professionals. When we're at the start of a new journey, We see you as the experts. If you're saying there's nothing you can do and giving us a sad look, we believe it to be the end, just as I did. If only my consultant had said, yes, the diagnosis is that of young onset dementia, and not one I would wish on anyone. But think of it as the start of a new life, the start of a life of adapting. And no, there's nothing I can do, but think how much you can still do, albeit differently and with support. How different I would have left that consulting room with hope of a life still to be lived, instead of a despair, believing it to be the end of my life. Language, body language, costs nothing for anyone to change. No finance involved. Please think of your body language and your language that you use to patients. Also, don't assume we can't. Assume we can until we prove you different. People concentrate on what we can't do. Concentrate on what we can do instead. Over Christmas, I broke my wrist, and I did it good and proper, breaking it in a few places, and I dislocated it, so I needed an operation. The consultant called me and my daughter to discuss the operation. The first words he said before hearing anything from me or my daughter were, on paper, you don't need an operation because you have dementia. Why do you need a left hand? As you can imagine, I was stunned into silence. I couldn't find any words that would come out. Luckily, my daughter did, and she told him exactly why I needed a left hand. And then I found my voice and told him exactly why I needed a left hand. I needed a left hand just as much as he did. So never make assumptions because we have dementia. Luckily, he had the grace to back down because I wasn't leaving that consulting room until he did back down. But it just shows how sometimes I think we've gone 100 steps forward, and comments like that make me feel as though we've gone 100 steps back. That's why I was also speaking at the House of Commons recently. If my daughter hadn't have been with me, I would have been bamboozled by this authority before me. I wouldn't have been able to find my words. So in the House of Commons, I was trying to persuade them to make John's campaign law instead of guidance. I believe you use it in your trust. Please don't forget it exists. If my daughter hadn't have been with me, I wouldn't have known that I was allergic to some medications. I forget. I wouldn't have remembered when I'd last eaten or drunk, but my daughter did. Our care partners are there to make your job easier, but also to make our life feel safer. We all know there's no cure for dementia. The medical model of diagnosis will focus on this fact. How better for healthcare professionals to adopt a more healthy balance of medical and social model of prescribing. They've made the diagnosis using their skills, their expertise. There is nothing they can do. But now concentrate on the person in front of you. concentrate on what they can still do. It will make you feel better as well, because you're concentrating on the positives, not on the diagnosis itself. Remember, not to diagnose won't make the problem magically disappear. And you'll actually be doing the patients a disservice by not diagnosing so they can access appropriate care and benefits. The latest figures show the number with young onset is higher than first thought. These people have jobs, they have mortgages, young children. So their needs are very different, just as mine were. Don't ignore them. When I got my diagnosis, so did my daughters. Both sides are equally important in their need of help and support. Finally, it's been said many, many times that every healthcare professional should read both my books. Somebody I used to know and what I wish people knew about dementia. And I also have a third book coming out in the new year. I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Wow, that was so powerful and really moving account of your experiences, and how life is. And thank you so much. I think when you started speaking about the effect that diagnoses has both on the person but also their supporters, their family, you spoke about and reminded us that it's not just about memory.
Yes.
And so often that is quite a focus for people. And I think as well, for me, I think a reminder about how we deliver diagnoses to people and the language we use and our body language and how important that is. So to be reminded of that today, I think is really powerful. Never make assumptions, which, you know, again, was just amazing, and a focus on what a person can do. You know, and don't focus on what they can't do. Let's focus on the positives. What can the person do? And I think finally, the other takeaway that you spoke about earlier on was around the concept of living well with dementia, but actually is living as well as you're able to. And I think that again was a real message that's really going to stick with me, Wendy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying the names of your books again.